Alright, this is a demonstration on toning, and toning is another shading technique. I've begun by just drawing a rectangle format, and toning is a simple technique where you fill in a medium value first, and you work into it with your eraser and your pencil to develop the drawing. So I'm going to fill in the entire shape with pretty even gray, as even as I can get it to go. So just shading it in, going back if it's a little inconsistent. That's pretty close. Now I'm going to take my tortillon, and I'm actually going to take the wide side of my tortillon, and I'm going to blend it so it's a nice, even, consistent gray value. And remember, when you use your tortillon and you really want that value to soften up, you have to apply some pressure to it. If you apply very little or no pressure, you really won't get the values to shift or move very much. So just going to smooth this out. If you want, you can fuss over the corners and the edges to make them really nice and sharp, and go back with your eraser and do all of this cleanup, but I'm going to leave it for now. You can go back to it at the end if you're interested. So now that we have our medium value, we can look at our object and kind of check it out. I have some really clear highlights here, a pretty big middle value area from here to here, and then the shadow on the ball here, and then my cast shadow and my balance point shadow are pretty small. There's a little different light source today, and light's coming from multiple directions, so the cast shadow is very short actually. It's just very faint right here. So I'm going to just stick with this little cast shadow. So the next step here is to just start by sketching the ball, the sphere. I'm going to draw a little smaller scale today, and I'm not rotating my paper for the sake of this video. So there's the sphere, that's it. And now again I'm going to look at the balance point and the cast shadow. If this is the center of the ball and this is the center, I see this coming out a little bit to the right. Sketch this shadow out. It dips down and comes back. Now on the back side of the ball, I see the biggest part ending right about here. And within the shadow, just past this center, to the left a little more, is the balance point shadow shooting out. Okay, there's a few darker areas in the mix. Really slight, but there they are. So I've got my sketch just as we did before. And now, instead of sketching all the highlights and middle values here, I'm just going to take my eraser and create the highlight and the middle value. So with my eraser, I'm just going to erase in where the highlight goes. And I'm going to go right over the line that I drew. I don't really need it anymore. So I'm erasing in the highlight all the way to the top. And then here, where I need it to be kind of a middle value, I'm just going to hatch through it, but not erase completely. And now I'll take my tortillon, and I want to find a cleaner part of my tortillon. I'm definitely not going to use this side. And I'm going to just blend slightly with my tortillon in that highlight and middle value area to get them to mix together. And now I'll remove the debris from the eraser. So now I've got a pretty good fade happening here. The next step for me is to add my darks. So the shadow on the ball looks like it is probably the darkest shadow. I'll add that in, start on the side and add that in. And at the bottom here you can see a little bit of reflected light. It's right about there. I'm shading that into the rest of the object. Fading it down. And this part I need to be a little more clear with. So I'll take my tortillon again. I'm going to use the smaller end this time and just soften these values up, kind of blend them together. There we go. the bottom of my object, I'm really seeing a blur between the object and the cast shadow and balance point shadow. So I'm going to go into the balance point shadow here and really give this some definition right at the base so I don't lose my object. And I'll fade this out as it goes up so it doesn't compete too much with the object itself. Right here we have a little more distinction. It's kind of a fine line here where you want one to fade out and the other one to blend in. And then the rest of the cast shadow needs to be slightly darker. And really sharp here. I don't want to blend this with my tortillon and mess up the edge that I have. I have a nice hard edge there and I want it to stay put. So right down here, I'm actually going to use my eraser and just really lightly brush over this to make that medium value a little more clear. And with my tortillon, I'm really going to carefully kind of blend that middle value. Soften up that edge. Now to make things pop out a little bit more, I see a little more dark right here on the ball. You can do a couple of things. I'm going to add that little bit of dark here. Base of the ball, and then I'm actually going to remove some value from the background to make my shadows, my cast shadows, and all those other things pop out a little more. So I'm just going to erase a little bit into this background area, and then I'll blend slightly with my tortillon to kind of soften it. I don't want it all to be the same. I want it to fade. I want my edges to stay sharp. Right here is a little delicate transition. I'm going to make sure my highlight is clear first, and then I'll work down from this. And then I might add a little value out here just to shape this up a bit to make sure my highlight stands out. That's a little sketchy, so I'll go back with my tortillon and just really lightly kind of blend it in so it's no longer like visible that there are sketchy lines in it, but it's clear. Now the other place I can really make the object pop a little more is on the shadow side of the ball over here. If I add a little more light into the surrounding area, and then I'll just blur that, blend it slightly with my tortillon. And there we go. Just about finished. So any more fussing and detail work I'm sure you can do at this point, but this is toning. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's just another approach. So practice.